She was sitting alone at the wedding until a lonely millionaire whispered, "Pretend you're with me." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. She was sitting alone at the wedding, her dress borrowed, her shoes a little too tight. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers the size of small cars, every corner filled with laughter, champagne glasses, and whispered gossip. But at her table, only silence lingered. She traced the rim of her glass, pretending not to notice the pitying glances or the way the bridesmaids looked right through her. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. Instead, it reminded her how small her world had become. Bills stacked at home, rent past due, 2 shifts at the diner waiting tomorrow. Tonight was meant to be her escape, a chance to forget. But surrounded by silk gowns and diamond cufflinks, she felt like a shadow among giants. Then his voice. Low, steady, almost like a secret. "Pretend you're with me." She froze, heart hammering. A man had leaned close, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark suit cut with the precision of wealth. His cologne subtle, expensive, wrapped around her like a spell. "What?" she whispered, blinking at him. He gave the faintest smile, eyes sharp yet lonely, as if hiding 1,000 untold stories. "Pretend you're not alone. Pretend you're mine." Her pulse quickened. This was madness. She didn't even know his name. But in that instant, as the spotlight shifted toward their table, as eyes turned with curiosity, she felt something unexpected. Relief. The stranger slid a champagne glass toward her. "Smile," he murmured. "They're watching." So she did. Awkward, hesitant, but enough. Around them, whispers softened, assumptions formed. To the glittering crowd, she was no longer the poor girl sitting alone. She was someone chosen. The music swelled. The bride and groom spun across the floor. But her thoughts drowned beneath a single question. Who was this man? Later, when the night ended and the laughter faded, she would discover the truth. The stranger was no ordinary guest. He was a millionaire, lonely, elusive, burdened by wealth that drew more parasites than partners. Tonight, for reasons she couldn't yet grasp, he had chosen her. But for now, she clutched the stem of her glass, cheeks flushed with heat, trying to keep pace with the charade. He leaned closer again, his voice brushing her ear. "I'll explain later. For now, just play along." And so the game began. Across the ballroom, others envied her. The whispers traveled faster than the music. Who is she? How did she catch him? They saw a girl lifted out of obscurity, not the debt and exhaustion behind her smile. He had drawn a curtain around her with a few words, shielding her from pity with the illusion of belonging. But he wasn't smiling, not fully. Beneath the charming mask, his gaze carried a heaviness, as if he was just as desperate for this pretense as she was. She dared to ask, barely moving her lips. "Why me?" His jaw tightened. "Because you looked lonelier than I feel." The words struck her deeper than she expected. For the rest of the evening, she played her part, laughing when he leaned in, nodding when others approached, letting the fiction bloom. But beneath the surface, questions multiplied. When the music dimmed and the bride tossed her bouquet, he guided her toward the exit, his hand warm yet careful at her back. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city lights stretching like 1,000 promises. He stopped, finally letting the mask slip. His shoulders sagged, his voice quieter now. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this. I just couldn't stand another night of being the man with no one." She stared at him. In the glow of the street lamps, the loneliness in his eyes was unmistakable. The tuxedo, the watch, the car waiting at the curb, all the signs of wealth couldn't hide it. Her instinct told her to walk away, to leave this surreal moment behind. Yet something tethered her there, a fragile thread of understanding. She knew what it was like to feel invisible in a room full of people. "You don't owe me an explanation," she said softly. But he shook his head. "I do. Tomorrow, dinner, my treat, no pretending." And before she could protest, he opened the car door for her. Not a request, an invitation wrapped in authority. She hesitated, the weight of her empty wallet and overdue bills pressing down on her. Logic screamed no. Curiosity whispered yes. She slid into the seat. As the city blurred past the windows, she realized something chilling. Her life had just changed course with a whisper at a wedding. And she had no idea where it would lead. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds of her tiny apartment, cutting across peeling wallpaper and a stack of unopened envelopes. She rubbed her temples, head heavy from too little sleep and too many thoughts replaying the stranger's whisper. "Pretend you're with me." His words echoed like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. She sat at the wobbly kitchen table, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in front of her. Across the table lay the unopened bills, electric, water, rent all, stamped with red letters. She ran her fingers along the edges, as if touching them might somehow soften their weight. But nothing could. Not the bitter coffee. Not the thin blanket she had dragged from the couch the night before. Her phone buzzed. Another reminder from her landlord. She closed her eyes. 30 days behind. And he wasn't patient anymore. She whispered to herself, "Just one more shift, one more tip night. I'll make it work." The diner called her name later that morning. The bell above the door jingled as she pushed it open, tying her apron in place. Grease lingered in the air. Coffee pots hissed, and regulars hunched over plates of eggs and hash browns. This was her real-world cheap coffee, sticky counters, and a paycheck that barely covered groceries. "Morning, Emma," her coworker called. Emma forced a smile, even though her body ached. "Morning." She slid into rhythm, pouring coffee, balancing plates, dodging insults from a customer who snapped for more ketchup. Every tip felt like a lifeline, folded, crumpled bills pressed into her pocket. But beneath the motions, her mind drifted back to last night, his eyes. The way his voice dropped low, the loneliness that had cracked through his polished mask. When her shift ended, Emma counted her tips in the back room. $36.75. Not even enough for groceries and rent together. She stared at the money in her hands, frustration burning behind her eyes. Her coworker, Jenny, peeked in. "You okay?" Emma shoved the bills into her pocket. "Yeah, just tired." Jenny tilted her head, suspicious. "You've been distracted all day." Emma almost told her everything, the wedding, the millionaire, the whisper. But the words stuck. Who would believe it? She barely believed it herself. That night, she returned home to a dark apartment. The fridge hummed emptily, holding little more than milk past its date and a jar of mustard. She sank onto the couch, hugging her knees, replaying the moment again. Then her phone lit up. A number she didn't recognize. Her thumb hovered, heart pounding. "Hello?" The voice was unmistakable, calm and commanding. "It's me." Her breath caught. "How did you get my number?" "I have my ways," he replied. There was no arrogance in his tone, just fact. "Dinner. Tomorrow night. No pretending this time." "Oh." She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced out, "Why?" There was silence for a moment. Only the faint hum of city traffic in the background. Then, "Because you looked like you needed someone. And so did I." The line clicked off. Emma stared at her phone, pulse racing. She should have been angry at his intrusion, at the casual way he commanded her schedule. But she wasn't. She was curious. The next evening, she found herself standing outside a restaurant she had only ever passed by, never daring to step inside. Its glass windows glowed with soft golden light, polished silver glinting from the tables within. She smoothed her thrifted dress nervously, wishing for once that she had something finer. The hostess greeted her with a practiced smile. "Reservation?" Emma swallowed. "I'm meeting someone." Before the hostess could ask more, a familiar figure appeared. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, confidence radiating from every step. Yet when his eyes met hers, something gentler flickered there. "Emma," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like he had rehearsed it. "You came." She managed a small nod. "I almost didn't." He gestured toward the table, set in the corner, away from the crowd. "But you did. That's what matters." Saturday. The table gleamed with crystal glasses and polished silverware. Emma hesitated, unsure which fork to touch first. He noticed and, without a word, shifted his own movements to mirror hers, easing her embarrassment. The waiter poured wine. Emma shook her head quickly. "Water's fine." The stranger, no, not a stranger anymore, smiled faintly. Water then. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Emma broke it. Why me? Why any of this? He leaned back, studying her. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the weariness he carried. Because in a room full of people pretending, you looked like the only one who wasn't. You didn't belong, and neither did I. We just didn't belong in the same way. Emma blinked. The honesty in his words disarmed her. He set his glass down. My name is Adrian Blackwood. Recognition jolted through her. She had seen that name in headlines, business magazines. A self-made millionaire, the heir who turned his family's crumbling empire into a powerhouse again. Untouchable, out of reach. And yet here he sat, across from her, speaking softly as if she were the only one in the world. Her throat tightened. Why tell me this now? Because, Adrian said, if we're going to keep pretending, I want you to at least know who I am. Emma stared at him, words tangling in her chest. The weight of her unpaid bills, her aching feet, her shabby apartment, they all clashed with the elegance in front of her. She should have stood up and walked away, before she drowned in a world too far from hers. But she didn't. She stayed. Adrian's gaze softened. I'm not offering pity. I'm offering a deal. Her stomach flipped. A deal? Yes, he said, his tone even but deliberate. Be my fiancé. Not for real. Just for appearances. 5 events, no strings. You help me, I help you. Emma's breath caught. She almost laughed at the absurdity, but his eyes didn't waver. This wasn't a joke. She gripped the edge of the table. And what happens when people find out? They won't, Adrian said simply. As long as we both play our parts. The restaurant seemed to fade around her, the clink of glasses, the hum of voices. All that remained was the pounding of her heart and the man across from her, offering something she couldn't yet name. Emma whispered. And if I say no? Adrian leaned closer, his voice low, carrying that same gravity as the whisper at the wedding. Then I'll disappear from your life, and you'll never see me again. But if you say yes. He paused, letting the weight of the silence press in. Then neither of us has to be alone anymore. Emma stared at him, her world teetering on the edge of something terrifying and intoxicating. The poor waitress, with nothing but overdue bills and a heart too stubborn to quit. The lonely millionaire with too much wealth and too little trust. 2 worlds colliding at a table for 2. And in that moment, she realized she was already leaning toward yes. The night after their dinner, Emma tossed and turned on the thin mattress in her apartment. Adrian's words looped through her head like a song she couldn't silence. Be my fiancé. Not for real, just for appearances. 5 events. No string. She stared at the cracked ceiling, listening to the hum of the old radiator. The offer was insane, unreal, something pulled from a movie. But the bills on the counter weren't a movie. The threat of eviction wasn't a script. And her life scraping by on diner tips, counting coins at the grocery store wasn't something she could rewrite. Unless his deal was real. The next evening, she found herself standing outside a glass tower that seemed to slice the sky itself. Blackwood Enterprises glowed against the dusk, its steel frame catching the last light of day. Her reflection in the glass doors made her pause. She smoothed her thrifted coat, suddenly very aware of how out of place she looked. Inside, the lobby was marble and gold, polished to perfection. Men and women in suits moved with brisk confidence, glancing only once at the girl who clearly didn't belong. Emma swallowed, clutching her bag tighter. Miss Brooks? A receptionist asked, her tone professional but cool. Yes, Emma said, her voice catching. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you, top floor. Emma stepped into the elevator. As the numbers climbed, her stomach sank. She wondered if the doors would open to reveal nothing, a cruel trick, her own foolish imagination. But when the bell chimed and the doors parted, Adrian was there, waiting. He was leaning against the edge of a mahogany desk, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked like someone carved out of confidence itself. Yet his expression softened when he saw her. You came, he said. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. I still think this is crazy. Oh. Good, Adrian replied. If it felt ordinary, it wouldn't work. He gestured toward a chair. On the desk between them lay a sleek folder. Its black leather cover gleamed under the soft light. Emma sat slowly, eyes fixed on it. "What's that?" she asked. "Our contract," Adrian said simply. Her chest tightened. "You're serious?" "Always." He flipped it open, sliding it toward her. Inside, neatly typed pages spelled out their arrangement. Emma leaned closer, scanning the words. Each line made her pulse throb harder. Clause 1. She would appear as Adrian's fiancée at 5 predetermined social events. Clause 2. She would keep the nature of their agreement strictly confidential. Clause 3. There would be no interference in each other's personal affairs. Clause 4. No physical intimacy beyond what was necessary to maintain appearances. And at the bottom, a single line in bold. This agreement will terminate upon completion of the 5th event, with no expectation of continuation. Emma's hands trembled. She looked up at him. "You actually wrote it out." Adrian's lips curved faintly. "I don't play with people's lives, Emma. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." She shook her head. "It feels cold, like I'm signing myself away." His gaze sharpened. "You're not. You're making a trade. My reputation benefits, and your burdens ease." He slid a second page forward. "These are the terms of what I offer in return. Rent paid, a stipend, medical coverage for as long as the contract lasts, and," he hesitated, "funding for your art studio." Emma's breath caught. "My studio? I heard you mention it," Adrian said, his tone quieter now. "That's what you really want, isn't it? A space to create, to build something that's yours." Her throat tightened. No one had ever taken her dream seriously. She barely allowed herself to. But here it was, written in black and white, like something that could actually exist. Emma pushed the papers back toward him. "Why me, Adrian? You could hire anyone. Some model, some actress, someone who actually belongs in your world." He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "Because they'd be playing a role. You're not. You're real. That's what people will believe. And that's what I need." Ugh. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the city below was faint, the only sound filling the room. Emma's voice cracked. "And what if I mess up? What if I can't carry it off?" Adrian's expression softened. "Then we'll make them believe anyway." She looked at the folder again. The pages blurred, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. It was everything she wanted, and everything she feared, wrapped into one. Her hand hovered above the pen. "This isn't love." No, Adrian said, his voice steady. "It's survival." Her fingers closed around the pen. The ink scratched against the page as she signed her name. When it was done, the weight in her chest felt both heavier and lighter. Adrian took the contract, sliding it back into the folder. "Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Brooks." He stood, extending his hand. She stared at it for a moment before rising to shake it. His palm was warm, his grip firm, but the spark that ran through her was unexpected. She pulled her hand back quickly, cheeks flushing. "So what now?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Now? We start your training. 5 events, Emma. You'll need to walk, talk, and look like someone who's been at my side for years." Her stomach flipped. "Training?" He nodded. "Tomorrow, wear something comfortable, and don't be late." Emma swallowed hard. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. All she knew was that with one signature, her life had shifted onto a path she could never have imagined. As she left the building, clutching her coat tighter around her, the city lights blurred through unshed tears. She whispered to herself, "What have I just done?" But deep down, beneath the fear, a fragile ember flickered. Hope, because for the first time in years, her dream didn't feel impossible. And all it had cost her was pretending to belong to a lonely millionaire. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her alarm buzzing on the nightstand. She sat up slowly, the memory of signing the contract hitting her like a weight on her chest. 5 events, 5 appearances as the fiancée of Adrian Blackwood, a man whose life seemed carved from marble and money. She rubbed her eyes, trying to convince herself it was still a dream. But the leather folder on her table proved it wasn't. At 10 sharp, a black car waited outside her building. Its polished surface reflected the cracked pavement and graffiti-smeared walls of her neighborhood, a jarring contrast that made her stomach twist. She climbed in, clutching her worn purse, the driver silent as the city blurred past. When the car stopped, Emma found herself staring at a boutique unlike anything she'd ever entered. Mannequins dressed in silk gowns stood like queens behind glass. Jeweled light fixtures glittered above the entrance, and inside, the air carried the faint scent of roses and money. Adrian was waiting by the reception desk, his suit sharp, his posture effortless. His eyes swept over her coat and scuffed shoes, but his expression didn't shift. Instead, he gave a small nod. "Good. You came on time," he said. Emma swallowed, her throat dry. "You didn't really give me a choice." A flicker of amusement touched his lips. "You always have a choice. But if you're serious about this, then today is the first step." A woman approached a stylist, tall and elegant, with eyes like she could measure a person's worth in a single glance. She extended her hand. "Claudia, I'll be helping with your transformation." Emma hesitated before shaking her hand. "Transformation?" Claudia smiled, cool and professional. "If you're going to stand beside Adrian Blackwood, you can't look like a waitress from a corner diner." The words stung, but Emma bit her tongue. Adrian watched her carefully, as though testing her reaction. She straightened her shoulders. "Fine, do your worst." The next hours blurred into a whirlwind. Dresses draped over her arms, mirrors reflecting versions of herself she barely recognized. Silks, satins, sequins, shoes with heels higher than anything she dared to wear. Stylists tugged at her hair, pinned curls, brushed layers of makeup onto her skin, until her reflection shimmered back at her like someone she didn't know. At one point, she caught her own eyes in the mirror and whispered, "This isn't me." Adrian's reflection appeared behind hers, his expression unreadable. "It's not supposed to be you. It's supposed to be who they expect you to be." She turned, meeting his gaze. "And who are they?" "The people who measure worth in diamonds and designer labels," he replied softly. "The ones who will be watching you the second you step into a room." Emma looked down at the gown draped across her frame, its silver threads catching the light. She hated how beautiful it was, how it made her want to believe in something impossible. By the afternoon, her feet ached, her head spun, and her patience frayed. Claudia clapped her hands once. "Enough for today. She'll do." "Oh," Emma glared at her. "I'm standing right here, you know." Claudia arched a brow. "And you'll need a thicker skin than that, darling. This world doesn't care about your feelings." Adrian dismissed the stylist with a nod. When they were alone, Emma exhaled. "Do you always let people talk to you like that?" He shook his head. "Number, but I needed to see how you'd handle it." Emma crossed her arms. "And?" A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "You didn't crumble. That's something." "Oh." The next day, training moved beyond dresses and makeup. Adrian led her into a ballroom at one of his hotels. The polished floor, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. "Dancing," he said simply. Emma blinked. "Dancing? No way. I'll trip over my own feet." Adrian extended his hand. "Better to trip here than in front of 100 people." She stared at his hand, hesitating, before finally placing hers in his. His grip was firm but gentle, guiding her as music filled the room. She stumbled at first, muttering apologies, her shoes scraping awkwardly. He corrected her with calm precision, his voice steady in her ear. "Relax, don't think so much. Let me lead." Emma laughed nervously. "That's easier said than done." "Trust me," he murmured. For a moment, she did. Her body loosened, her steps falling into rhythm with his. The music swelled, their movements smoother now. She looked up at him, startled by the intensity in his eyes. Her breath caught, and she stumbled. He steadied her quickly, his hand firm at her waist. Their faces were close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. She pulled back, flustered. "See? Disaster." Adrian's lips curved faintly. "Not a disaster, just practice." By the third day, etiquette lessons began. Emma sat at a long table, set with more silverware than she'd ever seen. A trainer instructing her which fork was for salad, which spoon for soup, how to hold a glass. She rolled her eyes more than once, muttering, "Nobody cares this much about forks." Adrian overheard and leaned closer. "They do. Not because it matters, but because it's another way to judge. Get it wrong, and they'll dismiss you before you even speak." Emma sighed, gripping the smallest fork. "Then I'll give them something to choke on." Despite himself, Adrian chuckled. The sound surprised her. It was the first time she'd heard genuine laughter from him, not the polite kind he wore like armor. Each day pushed her harder, walking in heels until her feet blistered, smiling through insults from trainers hired to test her composure, memorizing the names of board members, charities, and partners she would meet at the first event. By night, she collapsed into bed, exhausted. Yet, beneath the fatigue, something unexpected stirred a spark of pride. She was surviving. She was learning. She was becoming someone she didn't know she could be. One evening, as training ended, Adrian watched her closely. "You're improving faster than I expected." Emma smirked, wiping sweat from her brow. "What? You thought I'd break down crying?" He shrugged lightly. Most would. She studied him for a moment. "You really don't know me, do you?" His gaze lingered, thoughtful. "Not yet, but I'm starting to." The words unsettled her, sending a rush of heat through her chest. She looked away, pretending to adjust her shoes. By the end of the week, Emma stood before the mirror in a gown tailored perfectly to her frame. Her hair swept up, her posture poised. Her reflection, no longer the diner waitress who barely scraped by. She touched the edge of the mirror, whispering, "Who are you?" Behind her, Adrian's voice answered quietly, "Someone who's about to change everything." She turned, meeting his gaze. For a brief second, the world outside the debts, the doubt, the fear fell away. What remained was the dangerous possibility that maybe, just maybe, this pretense was leading her somewhere she couldn't return from. And the first event was only days away. The first event arrived faster than Emma expected. She stood in the back of the limousine, the hum of the engine steady beneath her, her hands clenched together in her lap. Outside, the city glowed with evening lights, streets buzzing with traffic, horns blaring. But here, in the quiet bubble of luxury leather and tinted glass, she could hear nothing but her own pulse. Across from her sat Adrian, calm, collected, every line of his suit flawless. He scrolled through his phone briefly before slipping it into his jacket. When his gaze met hers, she nearly forgot how to breathe. "You'll be fine," he said simply. Emma forced a nervous laugh. "Fine? I'll probably trip before we even reach the door." His lips curved slightly, though his eyes stayed serious. "If you stumble, you do it gracefully. They'll forgive clumsiness. They won't forgive fear." She swallowed hard, adjusting the hem of her gown. "Easy for you to say. You were born into this." Adrian shook his head. "No one is born knowing how to survive in their world. We learn, we adapt, and tonight, you'll do the same." The car slowed. Through the window, Emma saw the hotel entrance ablaze with flashing cameras. Paparazzi lined both sides of the red carpet, their lenses sharp, hungry. Wealthy guests stepped from sleek cars, their jewels glittering under the lights. Emma's stomach twisted. The driver opened Adrian's door. He stepped out first, tall and commanding, the crowd's attention snapping toward him. Then he turned, offering his hand to her. Emma froze for half a second. This was it, no turning back. She placed her hand in his. The heat of his palm steadied her, pulling her out into the glare of lights. "Smile," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. Emma lifted her chin, forcing her lips into a small smile. Cameras clicked furiously. Flashes lit the night like lightning. For a dizzying moment, she thought she might faint. But Adrian's hand tightened around hers, anchoring her. They moved together down the carpet, his stride confident, hers tentative but steady. Reporters called his name, shouted questions. "Who's she? Is this your fiancé? When's the wedding?" Adrian didn't answer, but his grip on her hand sent a silent message. Play the role. Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth, golden chandeliers, marble floors, tables adorned with crystal and flowers. Waiters glided like shadows, serving champagne on silver trays. Emma felt the stares immediately, eyes tracking her every move, judging, measuring. Adrian leaned close. "Breathe. They only have the power you give them." She nodded, though her chest tightened. They hadn't been seated long before the first test came. A woman in pearls and diamonds, her smile sharp as glass, approached their table. She rested manicured fingers on Adrian's shoulder. "Adrian," she cooed, "you've been hiding this lovely creature from us." Her gaze slid to Emma, appraising her like a dress on a hanger. "And who might you be?" Emma's heart lurched. She glanced at Adrian, But he gave nothing away. This was hers to handle. For a split second, panic threatened to undo her. But then she remembered the training, the endless lessons in posture, etiquette, composure. She straightened her back, lifted her chin. "I'm Emma," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's such a beautiful evening, isn't it?" The woman blinked, clearly taken aback by Emma's confidence. Slowly, she took her hand. "Charming. And where did Adrian find you?" The question was a dagger wrapped in silk. Emma forced herself to smile, even as heat rushed to her cheeks. "He didn't find me," she replied evenly. "We found each other." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Adrian chuckled softly, the sound smooth as velvet. "She has a way of putting things, doesn't she?" The woman's smile tightened, brittle. "Indeed." She excused herself, heels clicking sharply as she retreated. Emma exhaled, her shoulders sagging. Adrian leaned close, his voice low with approval. "Well done." But the night wasn't finished testing her. During dinner, a group of men at the next table laughed too loudly, their jokes crude. One of them, emboldened by drink, glanced at Emma. "Adrian, you finally bring a date. Didn't think you had it in you." The table erupted with laughter. Emma's face burned. Adrian's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, Emma spoke. "Maybe he just needed the right reason," she said lightly, her smile unshaken. "And sometimes, the best things are worth waiting for." The men's laughter faltered. One raised his glass awkwardly. "Well said." Adrian turned to her, eyes glinting with something unreadable surprise, maybe admiration. Under the table, his hand brushed hers briefly, deliberate and steady. As the night went on, Emma found her rhythm. She laughed when needed, asked questions, listened carefully, and mirrored the confidence Adrian carried so effortlessly. And for the first time, she wasn't just surviving the spotlight, she was holding her own. By the time the orchestra struck its final notes, Adrian led her onto the dance floor. She hesitated, but his hand was firm at her waist, his voice low. "Remember what I taught you." She let him guide her, her steps shaky at first, then smoother, falling into sync with his. The ballroom swirled around them, but in that moment, it felt like there was no one else. Just his eyes on hers, steady, unflinching. "You did well tonight," he murmured. Emma's lips parted, breath shallow. "I was terrified, and no one saw it," he replied. "That's all that matters." She laughed softly, the sound breaking the tension in her chest. "Maybe you're not such a bad teacher after all." His smile was brief, almost reluctant. "Maybe you're not such a bad student." "Duh." The music swelled, and for a fleeting second, Emma forgot this was all pretend. Forgot the contract, the rules, the distance between their worlds. All she felt was the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of his steps, and the dangerous thought that maybe, just maybe, none of this had to be fake. But when the song ended, reality returned with the applause. Adrian released her, his mask of composure snapping back into place. "Let's go," he said quietly. Outside, the night air was cool, the city alive with neon and noise. Emma climbed into the limousine, her heart still racing. She stared out the window, watching the lights streak past. Beside her, Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. Emma finally spoke. "So, did I pass your test?" Adrian glanced at her, his gaze lingering. "You didn't just pass, you exceeded." Her chest tightened at the words. She looked away quickly, afraid he might see the blush creeping up her neck. The car rolled through the city, carrying them back to lives that were supposed to be separate. But deep down, Emma knew something had shifted tonight. The lines of their contract had blurred. And that terrified her more than all the flashing cameras in the world. The limousine pulled away from the gala, the hum of the city fading as they drove toward the quiet streets near Adrian's penthouse. Emma sat back against the leather seat, her body aching from hours in heels, but her mind still racing. Her cheeks burned with the memory of every camera flash, every scrutinizing stare, every question she had somehow survived. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt unsettled. Adrian broke the silence first. "You handled yourself better than most people in that room tonight." Emma gave a tired laugh. "That's funny, because I felt like I was drowning the entire time." "Oh." He turned, studying her. "No one saw that, that's what matters." She pressed her lips together, watching the blur of city lights through the tinted glass. Do you always live like this? Under a microscope? Every step? Every word judged? Yes, Adrian said simply. Every day since I was old enough to understand my last name. Something in his tone made her glance at him. The hardness in his voice was real, but beneath it lingered something softer, weariness, loneliness. The car slowed, pulling into the private entrance of his building. Adrian stepped out first, then offered her his hand. She hesitated, then took it, the warmth of his touch grounding her as they walked inside. The penthouse was everything Emma imagined, and more floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the glittering skyline, marble floors gleaming beneath soft lighting, art on the walls worth more than she made in a year. Yet the air felt empty. Too clean, too perfect. Like a showroom, not a home. Make yourself comfortable, Adrian said, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it over the back of a chair. Emma wandered slowly, her heels clicking against the marble. She paused by a massive window, staring at the sprawl of the city below. From up here, everything looked small, like toy cars and tiny buildings, detached, untouchable. She turned back to him. It's beautiful, but it feels lonely. Adrian froze for a moment, then forced a faint smile. It is what it needs to be. She tilted her head. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he poured himself a drink, the ice clinking in the glass. He stared at it, as though it might give him courage. My father built this empire, he said finally. He worked until it consumed him. Money, power, reputation. He cared more about those than people, especially me. Emma sank into the sofa, listening quietly. When he died, it wasn't grief I felt, it was relief. Relief that I no longer had to prove myself to him. But the truth is, I've been proving myself to ghosts ever since. He laughed once, bitter. I built the company bigger than he ever dreamed. I crushed every competitor, silenced every doubt, and yet, his voice caught, and yet I've never been more alone. Emma's chest ached. She had seen his loneliness before, but hearing it now, stripped bare, hit her differently. This wasn't the untouchable millionaire the world envied. This was just a man, hollowed by expectations he never asked for. Adrian, she whispered. He turned, his eyes darker now, shadows flickering behind them. That's why this arrangement mattered. Because for once, I could walk into a room and not be the man they wanted me to be. I could be yours, even if it was pretend. The words stole her breath. Her pulse thudded in her ears, heat rising in her chest. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Adrian set down the glass and crossed the room, stopping a few feet from her. His gaze searched hers, fierce yet vulnerable. Tell me, Emma, for even 1 second tonight, did it feel real to you? Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to hide behind sarcasm like always. But the truth pressed against her ribs, aching to escape. Yes, she admitted softly. It felt real. The air between them thickened. For a moment, the rules of their contract seemed to dissolve. No strings, no intimacy, just the raw pull of two lonely souls colliding. Adrian stepped closer. She felt the warmth of him, the steadiness in his presence. Her breath quickened. He reached out slowly, almost hesitantly, his fingers brushing against hers. Her heart hammered. Every nerve in her body screamed to close the distance, to let herself fall. But the voice of reason shouted back. It's not real. It can't be. She pulled her hand back abruptly, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. We can't. This wasn't part of the deal. Adrian froze, his expression tightening. He stepped back, slipping his hands into his pockets, armor sliding back into place. You're right. Forget I asked. Emma's chest heaved, guilt gnawing at her. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Adrian turned away, staring out at the city lights. His voice was quiet now, almost broken. Good night, Emma. She lingered for a moment, watching the outline of his shoulders against the window. Then she left, her footsteps echoing through the hollow penthouse. Back in her tiny apartment, Emma sat on the edge of her bed, head in her hands, The contract had rules, clear, simple, unbreakable, and yet her heart was already betraying her. She whispered into the dark, "What am I doing?" Because deep down, she already knew the truth. Pretend or not, something between them had shifted tonight. And there was no going back. The weeks that followed blurred into a routine of appearances, gallery openings, charity luncheons, board dinners. Emma played her role with steady nerves, smiling when the cameras turned, speaking with just enough confidence to silence doubters. And each time Adrian took her hand, the line between performance and reality grew thinner. But perfection never lasts. The night of the Blackwood Foundation Gala arrived, the grandest event of the season. The ballroom was filled with the city's most powerful politicians, investors, celebrities, each eager to be seen, each eager to measure Adrian Blackwood and the woman at his side. Emma wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her hair swept into a sleek knot. Adrian stood beside her in a black tuxedo, his arm linked with hers, his mask of composure flawless. To the world, they looked untouchable, the perfect couple. Yet Emma couldn't shake the unease prickling beneath her skin. Maybe it was the way Adrian had been quieter all week, retreating into silence after their near confession in the penthouse. Maybe it was the way whispers followed them wherever they went, doubts, suspicions, envy. As they moved through the crowd, a familiar figure appeared. Victoria Langford, elegant, sharp-eyed, a woman who had once been rumored to be Adrian's lover, and who now stood as one of his fiercest competitors in business. Her smile was sweet poison. "Adrian," she purred, her gaze flicking to Emma with feigned warmth. "And this must be the famous fiancé. How delightful." Emma forced a polite smile. "It's a pleasure." Victoria's eyes lingered, narrowing slightly. "Funny. I've known Adrian for years, yet I've never heard him mention you until recently. Quite the whirlwind romance, isn't it?" Emma's stomach tightened, but she kept her tone steady. "Sometimes the best things happen quickly." Victoria tilted her head, lips curving. "Or sometimes the best lies unravel just as fast." The words were sharp enough to draw attention. A few nearby guests glanced over, ears perking. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Victoria," he said evenly, "this conversation is over." But Victoria only smiled wider. She lifted her glass, her voice carrying just enough to reach the surrounding circle. "You all do know this is just a performance, don't you?" A convenient little arrangement. The air shifted, conversations faltered, heads turned. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Whispers rippled through the crowd like fire. Arrangement? Contract? Pretend fiancé? Emma's throat closed. Her mind screamed to defend herself, to deny everything, but her voice wouldn't come. The humiliation pressed against her chest, heavy and suffocating. Adrian stepped forward, his eyes cold steel. "Careful, Victoria." She laughed lightly, swirling the wine in her glass. "Oh, come now, darling. Everyone can see it." The poor girl plucked from obscurity, dressed up and paraded around. It's almost charming, in a tragic sort of way. Emma's vision blurred. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. All she could hear were the murmurs, people dissecting her, reducing her to nothing but a fraud. She turned toward Adrian, desperate for him to say something, to silence them all. But he didn't. He stood rigid, his silence louder than words. And that broke her. Without another glance, Emma spun and fled the ballroom. The cool night air hit her like a slap, but the burn of humiliation lingered. She tore off her heels, running barefoot down the marble steps, tears streaking her face. Behind her, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. By the time she stumbled into her apartment, her gown torn, her hair undone, Emma collapsed onto the couch, sobs shaking her body. The contract, the lies, the stolen glances, all of it shattered under the weight of a single public humiliation. For the first time, she wished she had never whispered yes to Adrian Blackwood. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse filled with silence, Adrian stood alone at the window, his reflection fractured in the glass, his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set. He had chosen silence to protect her, to avoid fueling Victoria's venom. But in doing so, he had lost her trust. The game was no longer pretend. It was broken. And repairing it would demand more than contracts or appearances. It would demand the truth. The days after the gala were heavy with silence. Emma avoided Adrian's calls, his messages, his driver waiting outside her apartment. Every reminder of him felt like salt on an open wound. The humiliation replayed in her mind on a loop: Victoria's poisonous smile, the crowd's whispers, and Adrian's silence when she needed him most. She told herself it was over. The contract, the arrangement, the fragile thread that had tied them together. She had survived without him before. She could survive again. But survival didn't stop her chest from aching every time she thought of his eyes across the ballroom, the way he had looked as if he wanted to protect her, but didn't. It didn't stop the sting of how real it had started to feel before it all unraveled. 3 nights later, she trudged home from the diner, her uniform smelling of grease and coffee. Her feet ached, her body exhausted. She fumbled with her keys, muttering under her breath until she noticed the envelope taped to her door. Her name, handwritten in ink. Curiosity pushed past her weariness. She tore it open. Inside was a single note, Adrian's handwriting sharp and deliberate. "Meet me at the corner of 7th and Willow. Midnight, please." Her first instinct was to crumple it. Ignore him. Let him stew in his penthouse of marble and glass. But something in the simplicity of the word please gnawed at her. At midnight, she found herself standing on the quiet corner of 7th and Willow, street lamps flickering above. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain. She folded her arms, telling herself she was only here to demand answers, not forgiveness. Then she saw him. Adrian stood beneath the streetlight, not in a suit this time, but in a simple black coat, his hair slightly tousled as though he hadn't slept. In his hand, he held something, a small box, plain and wooden. "Emma," he said softly, almost cautiously. She crossed her arms tighter. "Why am I here?" His jaw worked, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he opened the box. Inside lay a silver key, gleaming under the light. "This," he said, "is to your studio." Emma blinked, confused. "My studio?" He nodded. "You once told me you dreamed of having a space of your own. A place to paint, to create. I bought the lease. It's yours." Her heart stuttered. "You, what?" Adrian stepped closer, his voice steady but rough around the edges. "You deserved better than that ballroom. Better than me standing silent while they tore you apart. I thought I was protecting you by not fueling the fire. But I see now, my silence hurt you more than their words ever could." Emma's throat tightened. "You should have said something. Anything." "I know." His eyes held hers, raw with honesty. "And I'm sorry. For everything. For making you feel like nothing more than a contract. For letting you believe you weren't worth fighting for. You are, Emma. You always were." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the walls she had built. But the key in his hand, the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, it broke through every defense. Adrian pressed the box into her palm. "This isn't part of a deal. It isn't payment. It's me, giving you something real. Because you're more than a role I asked you to play. You're the only person who's ever seen me. Not my money, not my name, just me." Quote. Emma's fingers closed around the box. The wood was warm from his touch, the key inside heavier than it looked. Her voice trembled. "And what happens if I take this? What happens if I believe you?" He took a breath, his words deliberate, unguarded. "Then you're not pretending anymore. Neither of us are." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Emma's heart pounded as memories crashed through her, his hand steadying hers on the dance floor, his laugh when she defied his trainers, his confession of loneliness by the window. All the moments that felt real long before either of them admitted it. Slowly, she stepped closer. "Adrian, I don't want grand gestures if they're just meant to fix mistakes. I want the truth. I want you to stop hiding behind contracts and money." His chest rose and fell, his voice rough. "Then here's the truth. I don't need a fiancé for 5 events. I don't need someone to polish my reputation. I need you. I want you. No pretending, no deal. Just us." "Tenter ETL." Her breath caught. The words hung in the cool night air, fragile but unshakable. Emma opened the box again, staring at the silver key. Her reflection gleamed faintly on its surface. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down. When she looked up, her voice was quiet but sure. "Okay." Adrian's brow furrowed. "Okay?" She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay, but this time, if you let me down, if you stand silent when I need you, there won't be another chance." His expression softened, relief breaking through. "You won't need another chance. I'll prove it." For a long moment, they stood there beneath the flickering streetlight, the city around them asleep, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Adrian reached for her hand, not with the commanding grip of their staged performances, but gently, like he was holding something precious. And for the first time, Emma didn't pull away. The weeks that followed were nothing like the ones before. For the first time since she'd met him, there were no scripts, no staged entrances, no whispered reminders to smile for the cameras. Emma and Adrian began moving through the city not as an arrangement but as something real. He still took her hand, but now it wasn't to sell a performance. It was because he wanted to. Emma spent her mornings at the little studio he had given her, a sunlit loft on the east side, with brick walls and wide windows that let in the golden glow of dawn. She filled the space with canvases, brushes, the smell of turpentine and fresh paint. For the first time in years, her art had room to breathe. She painted until her hands ached, colors blooming across the walls like pieces of her soul set free. Adrian came often, sometimes unannounced. He would stand quietly by the door, jacket still on, watching her with a softness that made her chest ache. He didn't critique, didn't offer advice. He simply looked at her like she was creating something the world needed. One evening she teased him, wiping paint from her cheek. "You know, millionaires aren't supposed to hang out in drafty lofts." He smirked. Maybe this millionaire finally found a reason to. Their nights were quieter. Sometimes they walked the city streets with no destination, blending into the crowd like any ordinary couple. Sometimes they sat on her worn couch, eating takeout, her head on his shoulder, his laugh rumbling low as they argued about movies. And sometimes, when silence stretched between them, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable, full. But the world outside still whispered. Rumors swirled about their whirlwind romance, about whether the engagement was real. Adrian ignored them. Emma tried to. But one morning, a headline struck harder than the rest. "Blackwood's engagement. Still a sham? Inside sources doubt the love story." She tossed the paper onto the counter, frustration burning. "They'll never believe us, will they?" Adrian folded his arms, his expression steady. "We're not here to convince them. We're here to live. Let them choke on their doubts." His words should have comforted her. Yet she couldn't shake the worry that the shadow of their beginning would always follow them. Weeks later, Adrian asked her to meet him at the same penthouse that once felt like a museum of loneliness. This time, she found candles glowing against the glass windows, soft music filling the air. And there, on the polished table, lay a small velvet box. Emma froze, her heart pounding. "Adrian," he stepped forward, his voice steady but tender. "Do you remember the night of the wedding? The first time I whispered to you to pretend?" Her lips curved faintly. "How could I forget?" He opened the box. Inside gleamed a ring, not the one from their contract, not a prop for appearances, but something chosen with care. A diamond set in a simple, elegant band, the kind of ring meant to last a lifetime. Adrian dropped to one knee. "That night, I asked you to pretend. Tonight, I'm asking you not to. No contracts, no arrangements. Just us. Marry me, Emma." Tears stung her eyes. She thought of everything: the diner shifts, the debt, the humiliation at the gala, the whispered promises under street lamps. And now, this. A man who had once been a stranger, a performance, standing before her with his heart in his hands. Her voice trembled. Yes, the word was small, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived. Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, his hand shaking for the first time she'd ever seen. Then he stood, pulling her into his arms as she whispered against his chest, "This time, it's real." The wedding was nothing like the gala, nothing like the glittering events where they had pretended to be in love. It was small, quiet, intimate. Emma wore a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Adrian waited at the end of the aisle, his eyes never leaving hers. Their closest friends, a handful of family, and even a few of Emma's co-workers filled the little garden chapel, sunlight streaming through stained glass. When the officiant spoke, when vows were exchanged, there were no cameras, no contracts, no doubters. Only two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of ways. Adrian slid the band onto her finger, and Emma felt her chest swell with something she hadn't dared to believe in: belonging. He cupped her cheek, his voice low but sure. "The best contract I ever signed," he whispered, "was loving you." Her smile broke through tears. "And this time, no fine print." They kissed, the garden erupting in gentle applause, petals drifting through the air. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma and Adrian stood together, looking out over the city. She held his hand, the weight of the ring, grounding her in reality. "Funny," she said softly. "It all started because I was sitting alone at a wedding." Adrian's lips brushed her temple. "And ended because neither of us ever will again." In that moment, the past, the deals, the pretense, the loneliness faded. What remained was real, solid, the kind of love that wasn't about contracts or appearances, but about two people who had chosen each other forever.